Good morning, world history. Welcome to virtual learning day 3. Woo! We're so excited! Yay! It's hard to have a party all by yourself. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed videos so far. I know that it's been a little tricky, but really good job to most of you on completing all of your Junopod assignments. You guys seem to be doing really well with that, so good. Now, again, please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or if something's not working, okay? Today, we are going to talk about European footholds in South and Southeastern Asia. So we're going to talk about how the Europeans were building empires in that area. Now, the first European power to gain a foothold in Africa and Asia was, I hope you all said Portugal. The Portuguese ships were small in size and number, but quite frankly, they had the biggest guns. And so when you have a big gun, you are able to do a bit more. And so when you have a big gun, you're able to win control of, let's say, some rich Indian Ocean trade. Now, Portugal is working on building an Eastern Empire. After Vasco da Gama's voyage, the Portuguese, under the leader of Alfonso de Albuquerque, burst into the Indian Ocean. Okay, so the Portuguese, so you've got their leader, and he's Alfonso de Albuquerque. If you're familiar with the city in New Mexico, same name. And by that time, Muslim rulers had established something called the Mughal Empire. So they are fighting the Muslim Mughal Empire in India. Okay? No. So they're fighting, and the southern region of India, however, were still controlled by a patchwork of local princes. And what the Portuguese did was they went in, and instead of attacking the Mughal Empire directly, they went to these local princes and one by one got them on their side. Hey, you sick of the Mughal Empire controlling you? You should join us. We'll help you overthrow them. And with the help of the southern footholds, they wanted to end the Muslim power and turn the Indian Ocean into really a European trading center instead of a Muslim-controlled one. So they start setting up some outposts. In 1510, they seized the island of Goa. And they make it their major military and commercial base. Albuquerque, their leader, is burning all the coastal towns, crushing Arab fleets. He's just destroying everybody. They took the East Indies port of Malacca in 1511. And it was actually really brutal because they seized Malacca and actually they massacred the Muslims that were living there. So they were not about to do this peaceful takeover nonsense. They wanted everybody out. And so they were actually killing a lot of innocent people. Over the next 50 years, the Portuguese built a trading empire with military and merchant outposts. Outposts are distant areas under their control. And this is rimming and spanning the southern seas. Okay, they used the cities to resupply as they were going. And actually, for most of the 1500s, the Portuguese now controlled the spice trade. Okay. Despite their sea power, though, they actually weren't able to make much of an impact on the nation because, as we talked about yesterday, they're not really going into the nation. They're mostly staying on the outside and controlling the sea, which leaves room for a couple other nations to rise up. The first being the Dutch. So the Dutch are from the country of... Not Dutchland. Dutchland does not exist. The Netherlands is where the Dutch are from. I hope some of you got that. So the Dutch were the first Europeans to challenge the Portuguese domination. The land that we know today as the Netherlands included a group of provinces, trading cities, stuff like that. As they were building a sea power in 1599, a Dutch fleet returned to Amsterdam from Asia, carried a cargo full of pepper, cloves, and spices that were just so rich. Dutch power basically said, okay, we need to get in on this because this spice trade thing is awesome. And so they set up in 1602 something called the Dutch East India Company, which you may have heard of if you've ever watched Pirates of the Caribbean. They talk about the East India Trading Company, which stems from this one. So the Dutch East India Trading Company. Now, the Dutch East India, I'm trying to say that 5 times fast. The Dutch East India Trading Company has an unusual amount of power because basically the Dutch East India Trading Company, I'm just going to stop, quit while I'm ahead, had full sovereign power. Sovereign, you may recognize from the term that we use when we talk about kings and queens. Sovereign power means that they could build armies, wage war, negotiate peace treaties, govern overseas territory. They had as many rights as the country itself. So they were almost like their own separate country, which is a lot. And in 1641, they managed to capture Malacca from the Portuguese and open up trade with China. So they're actually now edging in on Portugal's empire, trying to get their own piece of it. Like the Portuguese, they used military forts to further their trading goals, but they were able to forge closer ties with the local rulers, and many Dutch merchants ended up marrying some of the Asian women. By the 1700s, the growing power of England and France are also contributing to the decline of the Dutch Empire. So the Dutch had the 1600s, the Portuguese had the 1500s, but let's talk about somebody else that was looking elsewhere in the 1500s, and that is Spain. So Spain is focusing on the Philippines. Now, the Philippines, group of islands near Indonesia, kind of if you go from like India to Australia and you look in the middle, the Philippines are around there. Magellan had claimed the archipelago for Spain in 1521 before he was killed. And within about 50 years, Spain had conquered and colonized the island, ruling them under the name of Philip II, who was the Spanish king. Unlike most of the people of Southeast Asia, the Filipinos were not united, which made it easier for them to be conquered. They were more scattered tribal units instead of one united nation. In the spirit of the Catholic Reformation, Spain immediately sent priests to the Philippines to try and convert everybody to Christianity. Later, missionaries are also trying to spread Catholicism to China and Japan. The Philippines become this key link. They're able to get silver from Mexico and Peru across the Pacific to the Philippines. So now, if they go and mine silver from Peru and Mexico, they no longer have to go through the Atlantic Ocean. Now they can take it right directly to their outposts in the Philippines. And in this way, you've got a lot of silver going into the East Asian nations. So, real quick before we're done, it's a pretty short lesson today. We'll talk about Mughal India and the European traders, okay? So, Mughal India and the Europeans. Now, for 2 centuries, the Mughal Empire had enjoyed a period of peace, strength, and prosperity, like most empires do. We've talked about our empire cycles before. They take over, they establish peace and prosperity, and eventually something happens and they fall. Mughal India was the center of spice trade, though, which helped keep them rich for longer. The Portuguese and later the Dutch, English, and French were then permitted to build warehouses because, quite frankly, the Mughal emperors said, we're way too powerful to even worry about you. So sure, you can have some trading outposts because, quite frankly, we're better than you. And so we'll allow you to have some space in our little country because you can't hurt us. Little did they know this would eventually lead to their demise. Over time, the Mughal Empire weakened. You have conflicts between Hindu and Muslim princes because remember, the Mughal Empire is Muslim. And a lot of the Hindus there don't like that. Rulers then increased taxes. You've got civil war. You've got rebellions. You've got corruption. You know the standard. You have a lack of government economy, so you raise taxes to try and make it better. Nobody likes that. They rebel. You get corrupt. It starts to fall. As the power falters, French and English traders fight for power. The British and the French established East India companies as well as the Dutch. So you don't just have here we go, Dutch East India Trading Company. There we go. But now you also have the British East India Trading Company and the French East India Trading Company. These companies made alliances with local officials, and they actually organized its own army of sepoys, which were Indian troops. Sepoys. By mid-1700s, the British and the French became locked in a bitter struggle. So you've got the British versus the French over in India. The fighting involved both nations' lands in Asia and the Americas, so you actually have some fighting going on the American continent as well, and by that I mostly mean South America, not North. By the late 1700s, the Mughal emperor was forced to realize they basically forced the Mughal emperor to recognize their own rights And by the late 1700s, most of Britain and France were dominating India. It was no longer really under Indian control. Okay, so that's today's lesson. For your Juno pod today, you have your standard matching questions and concept questions, but you also have a primary source to read with 3 following questions. It talks about the Portuguese in India. So good luck. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I miss you guys. I hope you're having an awesome day, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.